low-cost version of the Remington Trail. It's pretty short. It's about 2 inches shorter than the Remington Vantage, and it's very well suited for smaller shooters or young shooters. One of the major differences between the two rifles is this rifle does not have a shrouded barrel. That's a pretty significant difference, and it's probably one of the reasons that the cost is down below that $200 mark. The rifle does not have any open sights, so you will need to use a scope. The included scope with this rifle is a very simple 4x32 scope. I was not very pleased with the scope. It does work, but I think this gun deserves something better. Even a Leapers 3-9 would be great. I'm sure Crosman can provide, say, a center point 3-9 scope, which would be very well suited to this rifle. Included set of rings would work for just about any other scope you'd want to use, but you will need to be careful because they are very low, so therefore you pretty much need to stick to a 32mm objective. This rifle is an import for Crosman, and it has their standard trigger. The trigger is the biggest shortcoming in this rifle. If Crosman could do something to improve the second stage, they would have a real winner on their hands. As it sits now, it takes a lot of patience to get good groups out of this rifle.
So now that we've had a chance to take a good look at this rifle, I'd like to talk about some of the marketing claims that are on the packaging. A lot of manufacturers are very good about putting very high numbers on their packaging, but not really delivering. I'd love to say that this rifle is different in that category, but what we found is frankly more of the same. This rifle also claims to be up to 70% quieter than other manufacturers' quote quiet rifles. But before we get started with that, let's take a look at some velocities. For this review, I used 3 different pellet types. The first was to get a baseline, and of course that's going to be the RWS Hobby pellets. The second was our most accurate pellet, which turned out to be the Crosman Premiers. That was actually somewhat of a surprise. I would have expected maybe JSB or H&N to be more accurate, but the Crosman Premiers gave us our best groups. And then ultimately, just to see how it would do with ultralight pellets, we shot the Gammo PBA Raptor pellets. Let's take a look at our standard pellet, and that is the RWS Hobby pellet. We had a low velocity of
699
feet per second, a high of 719 feet per second, an average of 711 feet per second. The extreme spread was 19.88 feet per second, and the standard deviation was only 6.78 feet per second. Let's move on to the best pellet, which was the Crosman Premiers. We had a low of 653, a high of 672, an average of 663.47 feet per second, an extreme spread of 18.49 feet per second, and the standard deviation of only 5.19 feet per second. Now let's take a look at the PBA Raptor pellets. They had a low velocity of 809 feet per second, a high velocity of 854 feet per second, an average of 832 feet per second, with an extreme spread of 45.42 feet per second, and the standard deviation of 13.60 feet per second. They're a generally very inconsistent pellet, and the accuracy certainly showed that inconsistency. I believe the best group I was able to get with the PBA Raptors were somewhere in the 4 to 5 inch range, and that's only at 20 yards. They're not a great pellet for this rifle. Now that we've got the velocities under our belt, let's take a look at some average noise levels. Now, I'm shooting somewhat in a hole here. I've got my house behind me. In front of me there's a dirt bank that's probably 8 to 10 foot tall, so I'm really in a bowl here, which I think makes it a little bit louder than normal. But I tested several different rifles so that we could get an average between the various types of rifles to see where this actually fits in. Now, Crosman says that it's up to 70% quieter than the competition's quote quiet rifles. Well, let's just look at some standard noise levels so that we can get an idea of just some averages. Normal speech is 60 dB. A lawnmower is 100. A circular saw is 100 dB. So if you're looking at normal speech being 60 and a lawnmower or a circular saw being 100, you can have an idea of where these numbers really fall in. The Gamma Whisper, and I have the Gamma Whisper with the gas ram, came in at 96 dB. The Crosman NPSS, which is another gas ram gun, but it also has a shrouded barrel, which helps with the noise, that came in at 93 dB. The RWS 34P, which is just a standard spring 22 caliber rifle with no shroud and no special mechanics, came in at 96 dB. In fact, it was just as quiet as the Gamma Whisper. Now, the Crosman Titan came in at 98 dB. In fact, it was the loudest of all of our samples. Now, I think what happens with this gun is my equipment doesn't measure the length of the sound, it only measures how loud the sound gets. Because the gas ram's shot cycle is so short, I think it gives the impression that it's quieter than it actually is. When you take something like the 34P, which has a spring and it does have a little bit of buzz to it, the length of the shot cycle is longer and the sound lasts longer. It sounds louder, I think, because it's just a longer sound. The Titan is very, very quick, and it's over very quick, but in actuality, it measured higher than all of our other test groups. Now, that may be because I'm in the bowl here, or it just may be that the gun is louder than people think. But in any case, it's certainly not 70% quieter than the other rifles we've tested. It was actually the least quiet rifle we tested. Fortunately, even though it didn't meet our velocity desires and it didn't really shoot as quiet as I'd hoped, it did shoot pretty accurately. At 20 yards, you can expect to get nickel-sized or quarter-sized groups using the Crosman Premiers in the cardboard box. Let's take a look at some of these shot groups. The Crosman Titan GP is a pretty interesting rifle. At only about $166 from Pyramyd Air, it really does fit a need, and you can see that Crosman is trying to really cash in on their nitro piston technology. The rifle's about 2 inches shorter than, say, the Remington Vantage, and that makes it about perfect for younger shooters. It's easy to cock and it's lightweight, so it's fairly easy to handle for smaller shooters as well. I definitely see this rifle filling a need in the airgun industry. It does generate some decent shot groups, which makes it a rifle to consider. Some of the things that you're going to need to look out for in this rifle: first of all, the scope needs to be replaced. It's a very inexpensive 4x32 scope, and I could definitely see this rifle benefiting from, say, even a Leaper's 3 to 9x32, something that has a little bit of magnification to it. The trigger is their standard trigger, and it's absolutely awful. I could see shot groups dramatically improving if the trigger